All right, welcome to video number 7, and today we will talk about validation. So how do we know when we have fit the model to some data? How do we know that it's good enough? So up until now we have usually compared our model result to some true system that we have used to simulate the data, but that's of course not available in practice since we don't know the true system. The true system is some piece of hardware that we want to model. So today we will talk about how do we figure out whether or not the model is good enough. And we have an annotated version of this notebook available in the documentation. You can reach it through the link here. Today we'll use experimental data. It comes from an online resource. It's an identification database. So we will download the data here from a link. We can have a look at their description of the data. It's a laboratory setup. It acts like a hairdryer. So it's kind of a heating process. So there is air being fanned through a tube and it's being heated at the inlet. Okay, so air is moving here through the tube, and then we heat at the inlet, but we measure the temperature at the output, at the outlet of the tube. So the input here is how much power we apply, or the voltage, to the heating device, and the output is the temperature measured by a thermocouple. All right, so it's a single input, single output system. All right, so this very first cell here will just download the zip file and unzip that and read in the CSV file. So we call read DLM, read delimited file, from this standard library. Okay, I just also want to point out here that I call this plotly function here, so that changes the backend of the plots to instead of using the default GR backend, it will use plotly, and plotly gives me interactive plots that I can zoom in and so on, and that would be useful in this video. Then I extract the input from the data I have read and the output, and I form the transpose here because control system identification want matrices for inputs and outputs, where you have the number of signals in the first dimension and the number of time points in the second dimension. All right, so I call that identification data object D0, and we can plot that. So here I plot D0 and the coherence plot. We see the output, the input, and the coherence. And we see that we have a nice and high coherence for low frequencies, and above 10 radians per second the coherence drops off, and that's probably because there is no excitation above that frequency. All right, we also see that the input is neither the input nor the output is centered around 0. So when we estimate linear models, typically we remove the mean of the input and output so that we are centered around 0, and that's always okay to do for linear models because you can just add that mean back later on. For nonlinear models, we're of course not allowed to do that. That would completely change the system we're estimating. But for linear models, that's good practice. All right, so I remove the mean by calling dtrend. So I return a new data set here, which is the data set without the trend. And in this case, we have used a 0 order trend, so it's just a mean. So since we had this description that air was heated in the beginning of a tube, and then the temperature was measured in the end of the tube, that sounds like there might be some delay, right? It takes a while for the hot air to pass through the tube. So here I plot an estimated impulse response, and we see that it takes a few samples before there is a non-zero impulse response. Here there is a dashed line in black that indicates kind of some significance. So the impulse response should ideally be above this black line before we say that it's significantly different from 0. And this, I would guess, is due to the air traveling through the tube. So that's something to keep in mind when we estimate the model order later. We estimate the model. All right, so sorry about that plot. The next step is to estimate the model. And to do that, I split the data set here into one part used for training and one part used for validation. And we see I can index the data set. If I index with a range like this, I take the time points 1 to end divided by 2. So this is the first half. All right, I use that for training. And then the second half, I use that for validation. We see, so here I perform arithmetic using the end keyword, and that's fine, you can do that. All right, and then I fit two different models. I fit one model using the prediction error method, and I say I want a model order of 3, and I have to have at least a model order of 3 since we saw this 3-step delay before something happened. And I also estimate an ARX model of order 2, and here I explicitly say that I have an input delay of 3 samples because the ARX method supports that. All right, so now I have 2 models, and now comes the validation part. And for that we will try to figure out how well the models perform in prediction and simulation on the validation dataset. So for that we will actually go back up to this plot. Here I call prediction plot. I pass in one of my models, the validation data, and I can additionally provide the name of the system. And that gives me a plot like this. So it plots the data, y1, and it plots the prediction fit here with a percentage fit. Okay, so 100% would be perfect fit. We never expect that because there is always some noise. If we have a 0 fit, then we are not doing any better than just predicting the mean of the data. But we can zoom in here and see that it does a fairly good job, right? So we don't expect it to be dead on because there is probably some noise in this data. We can increase the prediction horizon and see if we predict 10 steps into the future. We see now the prediction fit dropped slightly from 95, I think, before to 90, but it's still doing a pretty good job, right? So this is predicting 10 steps into the future. All right. The plot below, I show prediction for both models, and I also show simulation for both models. So instead of calling prediction plot, I can call sim plot, and that performs simulation rather than prediction. And each call to these plots will plot both the data and the prediction, the model output. But I only want to plot the data once here. So what I do is when I call these plots again after the first time, I say plot y equal false, and then it avoids plotting the data. It's also worth noting that the first time I call the plot, I just call pred plot. The second time I add an exclamation mark, and this is the syntax in the plotting package to say that I want to add to the previous plot rather than creating a new plot. So all of these 4 will now plot in the same. So we see I have prediction error model and ARX model for in prediction performance, and then I plot both of the models in simulation performance. And if we zoom in here, we see that they are all fairly similar to each other. There is not much difference. And that makes me comfortable. I have estimated 2 different models using different methods, prediction error method and ARX method, and they behave very similarly. All right, that's usually a good indication. If these models had behaved very differently, then I would have to continue trying to figure out why do they behave differently and which one is better. All right. Let's see, what else can we do? Yes, I just want to point out here also that this cell, the entire cell split in the data, estimating 2 models and fitting the data here ran in 32 milliseconds. And that's one of the joys of working with linear time invariant models, that estimating them, fitting them to data is incredibly fast, so you can iterate extremely quickly. Whereas if you would estimate some non-linear model, typically that is an iterative and rather expensive procedure. So these methods are nice and robust and can be considered almost technology. It's nothing fancy, right? It has existed for a long time, but it's extremely robust. Right. In this cell, I plot the Bode diagrams of the 2 models I have estimated, and I also estimate a model using the function tfest. and that uses frequency domain estimation. So it computes the power spectral densities of inputs and outputs and cross spectral densities and estimate the transfer function that way. And then I plot that as well. And in this case, all of the models agree with each other one more time. And that's yet a good indication that we have actually achieved a good model. So we see this TFS, it plots two curves. It plots the estimated transfer function, and it also plots an estimate of disturbances acting on the system, which is this dark blue line here. We see that the frequency domain estimate becomes very noisy for high frequencies, but that's okay. We don't particularly care about what the system does over here. But we can zoom in on the low frequency behavior and see that they are quite similar to each other. And that's once again a good indication that we are onto a good model here. All right, we can ask the models for what their impulse response is. And remember, before we had plotted the estimated impulse response where we estimated that directly from the data, and that's shown here in red, and that's how we figured out that there were a few sample delay here. And then we can plot the impulse response of the two models we have estimated, and they look roughly similar to each other. We see that the ARX model has an impulse response that is exactly 0, 3 time steps, and that's because we indicated that we had a 3 time step delay, whereas the prediction error method doesn't know about that, so it has a non-zero impulse response here, but it's very close to 0, so that's a good indication that it's a good model. The next form of validation we will do is we will look at the residuals between, the correlation between the residual and the input. So the residual is the error that the model makes when it forms a prediction. And ideally that error should be white noise. If it's not white noise, it means there is some pattern in the error, and that pattern, we should be able to model that pattern. So if we look at how the residuals are correlated with themselves, so that just means that if you look in the errors over time, is there some pattern? And we have some confidence lines here in black, and we see that the prediction error method has some significantly non-zero residual autocorrelation here. But it's fairly small, and I don't think it's anything we need to actually care about. So this means that yes, there is some correlation that we could potentially model here. But the question is, does it matter, or are we happy with the performance we have so far? And in this case, I think it's not worth bothering with this particular correlation here. The second plot here is the correlation between the errors and the input. Okay, so if there is some correlation there, it also means that there is some dynamics left that we could potentially model. And there is some small non-zero correlation here. But once again, I don't think it's large enough for us to actually care about it. I don't think we would improve the performance in our downstream task significantly by modeling this correlation as well. If there was much larger correlation and perhaps for a much longer time, then yes, it would be worth spending more time trying to model that. All right, so for that we just use the residual plot function. Okay, so to summarize, we can perform validation in a lot of different ways. We can obviously test how the models perform both in simulation and prediction. And we should ideally perform this validation on some kind of test data that we didn't use to train the model. We can have a look at the model residuals. In particular, we can look at the correlation in the residuals to see if we have modeled everything there is to model in the data. And then I like to estimate models using many different methods and see that they agree. And if they don't agree, I need to think harder about why that is the case. All right, thank you.